All right. Well, I don't know that we need to go through the introductions. You know,
we might not need to go through the introductions, but if we are going to do this for the recording's sake, then I'm happy to start if that's what you'd like to do, Suki.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Let's work through it.
So if everyone were here, I'd be thanking them for their participation in the commission on juvenile justice reform and emerging and best practices. That's such a mouthful of a commission. So I always refer to it as the commission. I think it sounds, well, that's how I refer to it. So I call it the commission. I'm on other boards and committees like everybody else, and that's how I have it saved in my drive, is the commission. So that's how I am going to refer to it. If people were here, I would thank them for their interest in working on the work group as well. This commission is statutorily created, as we were just discussing. It is in the state government article, but as everybody who is here knows, this commission, although new and by new statute, and the Fatality Review Work Group is new and by new statute, there was a prior iteration, and it was also statutorily created. It was created through the Human Services article, I believe, and that prior iteration was I think it was called the Governor's State Advisory Board for Juvenile Services, and we used to refer to that as the SAB. Kara called it earlier the SAB, but I always called it the SAB. And in the State Advisory Board, there wasn't always a fatality review subcommittee, but when both, I don't know if Kara was on it yet, but I was on it, and they changed the statute and included and added a edict about reviewing fatalities. The State Advisory Board specifically was created to give feedback to the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services. The makeup of that committee was different than the commission. The membership was smaller and had kind of a smaller, I don't know, reach. But I guess over time it started to increase in membership as well. We did add some I didn't have anything to do with it, but there were legislators that ended up getting added. But there was the creation of the edict about reviewing fatality. So there was a fatality review subcommittee of the State Advisory Board. And now, so there was a lull between, when we got a new governor, there was a lull between the prior State Advisory Board and now this new law that created the commission and its membership, and everybody who's here knows how many meetings we've had and what we've been doing organizationally. This work group is now the Fatality Review Work Group. And I think it's got 8 people on its membership, and there also is staff from GoCap and from the Department of Juvenile Services. And the purpose is to examine and review fatalities, and I'm reading right from the statute, involving children under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services, to provide recommendations on policies and programs to prevent fatalities. And the review includes a death caused by a child under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services if the child is convicted or adjudicated delinquent for the death, and also reviewing the death of a child who is under the supervision of the Department of Juvenile Services. So that will be the work of this subcommittee, or work group is what we call it in the commission. And today's meeting was to kind of go over the process and the procedures and the organization of the work group and how we will conduct our work that will in the end come up with recommendations that will go to the larger commission, and will find its way, I believe, also into the annual report that goes to the governor's office. So if there were people here who didn't know who we were, we would be introducing ourselves. I'm Judge Lara Weathersby. I'm at the Howard County Circuit Court. I've been on the circuit court for almost 2 years now, but I was a magistrate previously, and I oversaw juvenile delinquency cases as part of my casework, and I did that for 10 years. And prior to that, I was Carlotta in Howard County. I was the chief of the Juvenile Court Division of Howard County State's Attorney's Office. That was the last position I held with the State's Attorney's Office prior to leaving. And I was with the State's Attorney's Office for about 15 years. And I certainly am very interested in this topic. And Carlotta, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
I'm Carlotta Woodward. I'm the chief of the Juvenile Division in the State's Attorney's Office in Montgomery County. I have been in the State's Attorney's Office since 2012, and I've been head of this unit since 2017. I was deputy chief prior to being the chief of the Juvenile Division. Prior to going to the State's Attorney's Office, I was a defense attorney, and I represented juveniles and juveniles charged as adults for my entire career. And my unit also handles not only juveniles, but juveniles charged as adults. So we have both areas. So that is where I'm at. And I was on the Governor O'Malley's commission with respect to the juvenile justice many moons ago. And I don't remember exactly what year that was, but I was a prosecutor at the time. So sometime after 2012. So this is a very topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I love juveniles. It's a huge thing for me. So I'm glad to be on this.
All right. So we've gone over the overview of the work group membership and purpose. I'm happy to have anybody else introduce themselves.
Kara, you don't want to introduce yourself?
I can introduce myself. I am Kara Annenson. I'm the Director of Legislation, Policy, and Reform at the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services. When we had the State Advisory Board, I staffed that board for a year and a half. And so, and also staffed at that time was the work group, or not the work group, the subgroup on the Fatality review. So I am here representing the department and the secretary who has a seat on this work group.
All right. So for all of our purposes, why don't we just run through? Well, Suki, you take over. You go ahead and take over. But I'm hoping that what we will be able to do is to go over what our process will be, and also to talk about what backlog there. What is the workflow that we are looking at right now as we are, getting up and started.
Yeah, thank you. I won't take long, and I'll pass it back over. So we know that this work group was created by the statute HB 814, Chapter 735, and I'll reiterate, tasked with reviewing youth fatalities under DJS supervision and recommending prevention strategies rooted in care and equity. And I want to clarify that the group is not reinvestigating cases, but learning from them, identifying systemic gaps and recurring themes, actionable prevention insights. The goal is not to assign blame, but to examine what happened, how systems interacted, and what changes could prevent future tragedies. So I just wanted to reiterate some of that. And I know that we wanted to talk about some of the confidentiality parameters. Judge Weathersby and Carlotta, do y'all want to cover some of that before we jump and hand it over to Kara to talk about some of the practices and procedures at DJS?
I'll turn to you, Carlotta.
Specifically, do you have the agenda? Because I don't have the new one up. I'm sorry.
And I'll just make a couple of general comments while you pull that up, Carlotta. This meeting is being recorded, and we were just having a discussion about being subject to open meetings. When we talk about youth and the deaths, that is our edict in this commission and work group, that will not be open to the public. That will be confidential. There's an exception in the rule on open meetings, specifically kind of carved out for this type of discussion, that is designed exactly to do what Suki just said. It's not to assign blame. We're not looking at the case to look at the case. We're looking at the case in order to make things better for the future, or to make recommendations about making things better for the future, and hoping to prevent fatalities, both of youth under the supervision and by youth under the supervision. But because we will be talking about mental health issues, educational issues, delinquency issues, Department of Juvenile Services contacts, and specific youth, it's confidential. It's confidential by statute. It's confidential by design. I think it's understandable that it's confidential, and therefore those things will not be open to the public. The overview will be given to the commission, and so the public can receive kind of an overview of a summary of the case, and also will receive the recommendations that are given to the commission. And if the commission makes those recommendations to the governor, then they will be included also in the final report. At every fatality review work group meeting where we are reviewing a fatality, there will be a requirement that a new, fresh confidentiality agreement is signed by every participant who participates in the meeting. That is to underscore what I just said, that these issues are confidential by statute, and all of the information that we're sharing with work group members is not to be shared outside of the work group. You want to make any other comments about it, Carlotta?
I mean, I can discuss kind of looking at the forms with respect to the confidentiality component. Obviously, there are some references in those as to the specific law and statutes that are applicable. And specifically with respect to Title III, Subtitle 305, they talk about, it's called closed sessions, and that specifically gives us the exception. And I went through that, and kind of what I thought was applicable specifically was subsection, I think, 2, as well as subsection 13. I think 13 is a little bit more applicable, but that's kind of dealing with, sorry, we don't have the statute up, but it's dealing with complying with specific constitutional, statutory, or judicially imposed requirement that prevents public disclosures about a particular proceeding or matter. So I think that that's kind of where our exception is, to have the closed meetings and the confidentiality component, because that relates to courts and judicial proceedings 38827, which defines confidentiality for the juveniles for matters and for records. So it's for court proceedings and for records, as well as what information can be disclosed. Even DJS has their own thing, and I don't want to step on their toes, but they can't disclose information to different states unless it's through the ICJ. There's a lot of the Interstate Juvenile Compact. So there's a lot of things that can't be. And I think that the other sections that are included in the confidentiality agreement is dealing with the general provisions article, where it talks about the penalty of the violation under 3-402. But I think it also, 3-401 is not referenced in the actual
confidentiality agreement.
Yes.
Mhm.
However, it should probably be in there.
Okay.
It's the application of the section. So I think 3402 kind of relates a little bit to 3401. So I think that should also probably be disclosed in that or included.
Okay.
But that's kind of the confidentiality component and why has to be closed. And obviously the other sensitive information that Judge Weathersby spoke about.
And so we had talked also about those statutes specifically being shared with the group, and we're hoping, Suki, that you'll be able to share that with the Fatality Review Work Group. Those, now I'll call it 4 statutes, that being the General Provision Article 3-305, 401, and 402, and then the CJ 3-8A-27. It would be a good idea that everybody get a copy of those specific statutes so that they can know what we're talking about.
Yes, of course. Okay, so those are our confidentiality parameters. And folks will get more information about that. We do know that the confidentiality agreement will have to be signed each and every meeting before we review any case files. So we will have those at the ready, and we'll talk more about the process for housing those and signing those and all of that. Kara, we would love to hear from you about the context of youth fatalities under supervision and historical responsibilities and what's shifting for this commission, and just more from within DJS about how this is all going to flow.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So when a fatality occurs or when a young person under our supervision is adjudicated delinquent or found guilty for causing a fatality, we will let the staff or the commission know, so you, Suki, about that incident. And then we will be working on documents for this committee to review. And so one thing that I do want to note is that when we were working on this in the past, there are times where we have young people that die from all sorts of incidents that are under our supervision. So we've had a multitude of different things that have come up, so we can talk through some of those. Some of the responsibilities that would shift under this commission is, but previously the department had been staffing everything. And so we will be providing the context of the youth's case. We'll be talking you through from our higher level managers. We'll be walking through the case history, talk through the actions that the department took, about the young person's background, about their family background, about their educational history, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that the committee has. We will be providing the documents in advance, and as someone who staffed this group before, I think something that really benefited the group was reviewing those files in advance. So that the group could come prepared with questions for the work group, or if they have things that were flagged or wanted to make sure that the department talked about, or you felt like a piece was missing and what we had documented, we can have some time to make sure that we can discuss that at the actual meeting. And so there'll be staff from DJS here that actually from the county in which the youth was being supervised to present those cases. And so they'll review the case, answer any questions, and then there can be a discussion after a kind of about what the group's thoughts and questions are. And so I think that's primarily the practice of how this will work. So I think just to highlight again, DJS will be the one who's doing the case overview and representation specific for the young people coming from those regions. And then GOCCP will be responsible for the documents getting out and collecting back the confidentiality pieces of that.
Well, can I ask a question? I'm
Mhm.
sorry. And maybe I didn't hear it correctly, but I think you said when you started out that the cases are going to be for those that were adjudicated delinquent for deaths. I mean, just knowing what the law is that murder, usually if they're 14 or older, they're charged as an adult. So will that also be encompassed? And
Yeah.
then,
I said adjudicated delinquent or found guilty.
okay, I didn't hear that second part.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right,
No
thank you.
problem. Yes. Right. Most of the time that's the case, but there are, as someone who practices, there are
Yeah.
always something,
Correct.
some sort of something that comes up.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't hear the or
No
guilty.
problem. And this is any fatality, so I just also want to be clear about that context. We've reviewed cases for young people who were on our supervision that have passed because of other incidents that have happened, medical issues that have come up, or other health-related issues. But those will be all the ones that we flag for this group, and then we'll know how many. You guys will have an expectation of how many are coming, and we'll make sure that all the documents are to you all ahead of time.
Can we talk a little bit about how there will be the confidential dissemination of documents?
Mm-hmm. I think how we had done it in the past is the documents were in a Google Drive that was accessible through a password protection. But I don't know, Suki, if you and I have worked out how that would work. We also have Virtue that allows us to send documents confidentially as well. So I think those are two options.
Kira, how was it done with the SAB?
We had a password protected Google Drive that things were uploaded to. And then once the meeting was over, the documents were removed from the Google Drive, so they didn't live there forever. And just the notes from the meeting stayed in that drive with initials. We only ever used initials when we took notes. So they would have the documents up until the meeting. We would remove those documents so people didn't have them in their emails.
Okay.
Sounds like a logical method.
So is that what we're contemplating doing again?
I'd be fine with it. I don't see an issue. I know that so long as they go away and they don't live with us, we'll have the confidentiality agreements stored somewhere, and that's, I think, the most of the notes.
I wonder if it might be wise, and I haven't reviewed the confidentiality agreement to this extent, but I wonder if it would be wise to include in there that this is how it's going to be shared, and you're not permitted to save it on any independent drive, and you're not allowed to print it out or do anything.
Screenshots or
Yeah.
that's fair.
Right.
Like a little a manual, confidentiality manual.
Right. Kara, maybe you could talk also about what are the types of materials that generally got collected, and what, if any, kind of special requests were there for information or how would a member ask for additional information?
That's a good question. So it's given what we were providing was overview and summary, and then documents that we had related to the young person, so educational records, things like that, for review. Sometimes there would be questions because maybe they referenced a school record that they didn't see in the document. So we would go back and see if we actually had those records. Sometimes there would be medical things that people had questions about. So we would just see if there was anything else that was that we could add to that. So those are kind of some of the things that people would ask for, usually related to supplemental records or supplemental questions about educational things.
Were there routinely things that you wanted to have that you couldn't get a hold of, or that prior work subcommittee members had kind of wanted to see but you were not able to reach?
I think they're kind of one-offs. Like, I think most of the time we get all of youth's records, but in some instances, depending on when the review was and what, like the hospital records or things that were stemming maybe from the incident that occurred, we might not have all of that yet, depending when the review was and what we're able to get from the actual, from the release to get the actual documents.
And would you get police reports if it was
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Police reports were not necessarily the issue. It was like the supplemental, like health medical records, maybe if the young person was then hospitalized after whatever incident occurred.
Kara, I have a question. Were there any issues in getting, I wasn't on the SAB, so were there any issues if the child was like co-committed or like a crossover youth, like dealing like a SINA child as well as under DJS's? Was there any issues in receiving the records related to the SINA case?
Sometimes that could be challenging. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Yes. It just depended on how well the jurisdictions were working together at the time.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, maybe we should go into kind of just the logistics of the meetings frequency. Oh, and Kara, one more question.
Yeah.
What we had talked about starting our look back as of Jan 1. Do you have any idea of what we're looking at?
I think there's about, when I asked this earlier, I think there's about 8 cases.
Okay. And what would you, knowing, you being really the only person here today who was on the prior subcommittee, how many could you address at a subcommittee meeting or now a work group meeting?
I think given the nature of the subject matter and the volume of what is required to review, I would say like max 4.
You said
Yeah.
4, max 4, and kind of depending on the type of.
And I haven't done a review. I asked them to go do to send me the stuff so I could see, how intense, because they range, right? So we can kind of see what all those are. Because I think some of them could be a little bit shorter. But if they're more intense cases, it just gets to be heavy.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so maybe we could go into what on our agenda, Suki, number 4.
Yes, that sounds right. So, Kara, we've been thinking about the meeting sequence, and we'd initially thought that we would try to have our first review before the end of the year, and then to kind of kickstart the quarterly reviews in 2026. So we were thinking about holding our first one in October and then jumping into 2026 with the January and then a quarterly sequence, January, April, July, October. So that would put us at the beginning of each quarter. I don't know if if the beginning of each quarter, that's when we're starting to draw up our reports. Maybe that's not a good time, but if that timing would work for you or make sense for you, if October is enough time for you to look back and, But that's what we were thinking there.
I think that makes sense. And I think that maybe if we just say that, I think the cases that will get tight are the cases that are like maybe a month before. So if we could say like all cases up leading up to 15 days prior to the meeting, 'cause that might not be enough time for us to get everything together.
Right.
So like the previous quarter up until, so if it was in October, like September 15th.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Folks will want to get this onto their calendars. So what I'm going to do is send around a doodle poll to get a meeting time. So we'll see. Well, hopefully we'll make it the first of the, first Thursday in January and in the quarter thereon. So I'll send around that doodle poll in the coming days so that we can get it into folks' calendars and make that the standard meeting time so folks can have that in their schedules. We do know that the meetings will be 2 hours. Do you feel like, Kara, that's enough time for 4? How long were the SAB meetings?
Really depended on the number of cases, but we were usually had scheduled the blocks for 3 hours.
Okay. Were there breaks?
Oh yeah, we usually try to give people a few minutes to regroup after one, and then we would get the next, because usually they weren't all the same region, so we could kind of give our staff a little bit of time and then bring on the new staff. So we usually try to give like a 5 to 10 minutes for a little transition time. And maybe that's one of the things that we just talk about in advance, like how many do we have slated, kind of what do we want the schedule to look like. But I think a 3-hour block makes sense.
Judge Weathersby, Carlotta, any reaction to that?
No, I mean, 3 hours sounds really intense and long. And I think, as we get started, we would kind of be playing it by ear. We could have a kind of an offline conversation about the scheduling of, and I think in any given meeting, let's say we had 3 or even 4, reviews. If during the meeting it seemed like it just wasn't tenable to get to that last one, we would just put it off until the next meeting. So I think you're going to be a good indicator, Kara, or whoever represents DJS, about how much time each case would take.
I think that's a good point. And I think also once we kind of have our first meeting, we'll also get a feel of the subcommittee members. And at least in my experience, when people had reviewed the documents ahead of time and people had kind of had that, meetings did run much faster than when that hadn't happened.
Okay, it's helpful to know how y'all have run the meetings with the breaks and knowing that you're switching over because they're region based and there's different staff. So I also want to recognize and respect the time that folks are taking to prepare for the meeting. So we'll need to be sure that, or try to be as close as possible to the time that we have set aside so that those folks haven't prepared for not. So, all right, well, we've already talked about looking back to the beginning of this year. So you'll look back and see what will work for an October meeting, and I'll look back and I'll send out that doodle poll to determine the best day and time. So it looks like we're on to number 6 here, our next step. So the first would be to confirm that date and time for the October meeting. For you,
We're pulling together the case numbers. Yep.
Exactly. We'll work on, I think it's decided that we'll go with a Google Drive, Google Docs, and we'll sort that out between us, Kara, and our regular meetings. We're still updating the guidelines, and we'll share that out with folks, as well as the different statutes and those things for the confidentiality agreements. Another thing I wanted to note is that following this meeting, now that we've done all this work to get organized, I do want to make sure that the rest of the work group members are aware of everything that's happened today and are happy with the results in terms of the sequencing of the meetings and all of that. But I'm working on the work group summary. And once we get some type of consensus around what we've talked about, I'm going to work that up and circulate that so folks can be looking at that. So I just wanted to say that for the record. And we'll have that completed by late next month. So folks should expect to see that coming soon to reflect this work and the forward movement of this group. Anything else, Judge Carlotta, Kara, you want to bring up at the close here?
No, I don't think so. I guess I'm going to be hoping, and I don't know how to effectuate this, but I guess I'm going to be hoping that we will have the work group members view the video of this or listen to the video of this so that they know what we talked about. I would, reach out to each member, as I told you, Suki, at the beginning before everybody was here, and Carlotta certainly knows I'm going to be out for a while. So I'm not going to be able to reach out to them personally, at least not over the next month. But I feel like the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to set a meeting and we're going to get started, and it'll probably be in October, and we're just going to dive in. So they're not, the other members not being here, I want them to know that this is coming. So, I don't know what else to say about that.
Sure, I'll definitely get them all of this information and probably more than they want.
Okay. Anything else, Carlotta?
No, nothing for me. I think we went through everything. I think we've got a plan of action. I think that this will work extremely well, and I do hope to see the other members of the work group in October.
All right.
I'm sure they'll be there. We did have to move this meeting, and that I think is on me because I believed that the other DJS designee was going to be the presenter, and then I learned that it wasn't, and so I think that it was on me that I had to invite Kara, and things just got thrown off. So I will take the blows for that one. So I will get it together. So thank you for your grace. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a very, very pleasant weekend, and there will be more soon. Judge Weathersby, when are you out?
Starting on Monday.
Okay. Well, you go with all of our best wishes.
Good luck, Judge.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
All right.
Bye. Bye,
Bye.
Carlotta. Hope you had a good cruise.
Bye, guys.